bigger than Enron. That's what Harry Markopolos claims. This is bigger than Enron. And what he's talking about is the General Electric alleged fraud. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to relate it back to really the point of this, to not bury the lead, as you know I like to talk about. So we're going to talk about this as it relates to search traffic and controlling the narrative and why this all ties in. But it's important to really talk about the story itself briefly, even just briefly. So I'll keep this segment short. So what basically happened is Harry Markopolos is basically an accountant. He's a forensic accountant who uncovered the Bernie Madoff scam. And he's coming out now and saying, look, this GE is basically hiding a lot of things. They're having some irregularities in their GAAP accounting. And there's a lot of noise on both sides. So I used to work in the high yield and high grade desk for JP Morgan in New York. And I can tell you there's a couple of things that are a little bit off and a little bit fishy. So number one, this came out Thursday. So everything's happening today, really the stock moving today, and you see that recovering. But the first thing I want to call out is people are saying the CEO buying $2 million of stock. That's a positive. That's really not a positive technical. I mean, that's probably what the CEO would do regardless, right? So that can't be proof that everything Harry Markopolos is saying is false. Also, he published a 175-page report and gave it to the SEC and the federal authorities. So it's not like he's just making it up. But the thing that's, I think, has a lot of people puzzled, if you're not familiar, is the idea of short selling and how it's even legal. If this were on the long tail, if someone were to say, look, Mike, it's basically like what Elon Musk would do, what he did in September right before he went on Joe Rogan, and he said, I want to, at 420, that's the price. I'm going to take the company private. And what he's doing is he's sending out a signal and trying to boost the price. You can't manipulate the stock, though. You can't manipulate perceptions in the market like that. So he's in a lot of trouble for that. And people are saying, well, why isn't Harry Markopolos in trouble? Because it turns out Harry Markopolos is just openly not admitting, but because that sounds like it's an admission of guilt. He's saying, look, I'm working with a hedge fund. So basically the hedge fund is covering his short. And so he's taking according to him, he's taking a percent of anything that's gained. So the short is essentially banking on the stock to fail. So if the stock falls, the hedge fund covers that short for him. The problem is if there's a margin call. So what's happening right now is the risk that the hedge fund had to have considered. So if it's a $10 stock and you put a short on it, you're going to benefit from every penny that goes below $10. Negative news drives stock down, so you can see the potential conflict of interest someone would be reading the story and saying. So if Harry Markopolos is all of a sudden withholding the information and then drops it, and then all of a sudden, links up with a hedge fund who can make a boatload of cash on a short. Shorts pay better than the long tail win on any sort of capital gain. If he's sharing money, it sounds like it's profiting off a story, which then you have incentive to potentially make some information up. That would be someone's thinking to say, I can't trust this guy. But you've got a bunch of analysts coming out and saying, look, there's no way this is true. Well, that's also not proof either, because you've got, number one, they've got their own positions. As a credit analyst, like I said, I knew some of these credit analysts. It's not like they're just like making calls. They're investing, as a credit analyst, you get a chunk of money, or stock analyst in this case. You invest your chunk of money. So you are culpable when your little book of business fails. So all of a sudden, if you come out and say, oh, I don't know, well, that's just only going to contribute to the negative news and the decline. So of course they're going to come out and say it. I don't think they're lying. I just think they may have missed it if this is true. I don't know, because I think it's improper to say whether or not this is true. So the other thing is, you've got their reputation on the line. If you're an analyst who gets something this wrong, that's not good. And, that's the interesting details of this as you watch. I've watched so much of this and so many of his interviews, and there's a couple outlets that are going to spin it a little bit. But you've got one of the guys, he's just always comes on CNBC, which is fine. I'm not saying anything about that, but his name is Nick Heyman, and he's the GE analyst over at William Blair. So I've actually seen his name a few times talking about GE, and he actually comes out and says, well, I'm not really, an expert in the accounting. That if you're a CFA, you're likely an expert. Like I said, these credit analysts know, they know 101 gap accounting. They know how to account for what's looks like $20 billion he's alleging. So if you can't catch that much money, that I think you'd be hard pressed to say you're an expert on anything financial. So I think that these are very carefully chosen words. And they're also not saying he's lying. So I think also that's a legal standard that they'd have to consider, just like saying the word, I'm saying allegedly a lot. So this is just really interesting. But I really want to talk about, moving on. I want to talk about one interesting thing, which as it relates to digital marketing. And, I was interested. I wonder how much money, what's the damage control? I wonder how much money GE is actually spending on this. So I thought to look into it, and it was really, I think, fascinating. And if you're interested in the business and the marketing side, this is where they blend. You'll probably like this too. So I put in the Google Trends. So this is a free platform for anyone. So I suggest you check it out if you're likely already using. Going, Nick, I already use this. Yes, probably. So I went ahead and typed it in, and this is Thursday's traffic of GE, the GE report. So he put out a 175-page report. If GE was smart, they'd buy so many ads that it would just bury it. And they did a pretty good job when you actually look at their damage control. And if you're out, like I said, if you're out there listening, you absolutely use your ad campaigns as damage control in negative times, but also in positive times to, to push your stories and to tell your stories and get the right people, push your narratives by buying these different these different AdWords and these keywords. So look at the absolute spike of GE report, and that one's not too surprising because who would be searching for GE report if there wasn't a report, right? So then I type in, if you just type in GE, I actually didn't look at this one. So yeah, pretty massive spike, and it's these wanes, these ebbs and flows are by the hour. So that's why you see this. I've got this up to 7 days, and you see actually the places is actually really interesting too. The regions this is happening. You've got the related queries. So this all makes sense, especially if you're doing ad buys, you can look at your related queries, but they are spending an absolute fortune. If you think about the keywords they're buying, because now they have to buy GE, they probably have to buy GE fraud. So let's actually just look it up. So if I go to Google and I type in GE, so they've got this ad, GE Newsroom, in which it's just basically like a press report. They're GE reports, and they're basically putting this ad as like extended long form content to explain away the problem and do damage control. Smart. That is smart. So let's see. It hits for GE, and this could be like broad match modifier, I bet. So if I do GE fraud. Let's do GE fraud here. Yep, it hits for GE fraud, which again is probably a broad match modifier for GE, but they still got to buy it. And not only do they got to buy it, I'm not even sure if Harry Markopoulos was smart, he would have bought the term, but I don't see him doing that, which that would have made a massive difference. I'm not really sure why they did that. So that's a key lesson, everyone. That's a big miss on the part of Harry Markopoulos. If this is true, I don't know if this is true. I cannot specifically say. All I can specifically say is it's weird that a credit analyst would say they're not an expert in the accounting, and also the CEO and credit analyst coming out in support is not proof of anything. Also, it'd be insanely illegal if Harry Markopoulos was just making this up. That's all I'll say. I don't know if he is. I haven't gone through the report myself. I'd like to, and I plan to, but for now, I can't say whether it's true or it's not true. But you got to think that he probably thought that one through, and the hedge fund would absolutely be on the hook for this too. So when I see that, I tend to think, well, he must be legally. I'm sure he had consulting. He must be in some way, shape, or form not making any of this up. And it's highly unlikely he's making any of this up. And G saying it's not true. So this will be really interesting to watch play out. So I'll make sure to update you guys if anything happens. But yeah, just finishing this out. He's GE has bought Harry Markopolos. Again, probably likely a broad match modifier, but they've probably bought Markopolos. I wonder if they bought Harry. That would be expensive. There's no way they did. Yeah, okay. Harry's bought Harry, but okay. So they didn't buy Harry, but they bought Markopolos. So as you can see, all this starts to add up real quick. So even if I look at the trends, and if I go down to, let's even try the breakout report of Harry Markopolos. So this probably will produce some sort of spike. Again, interest in the last 7 days. Yeah, so that's also interesting. You can see the interest wasn't as high. And that's probably because the amount of the sheer volume of content put out in protection of GE, which is smart, good for the analysts, good for the outlets if they have an interest in that. Again, I'm not here to call balls and strikes or anything like that. I'm just reporting this part of the news because I haven't gone through it, and it would be, again, improper to say without the evidence. But I can say that the damage control is well underway, absolutely well underway. It's really interesting to see the buying ad strategies of them playing this defense, and I think there's actually a lot to learn from that in terms of like negative AdWord buying, in terms of competitive AdWord buying, and trying to control the narrative. It would have been really smart. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I have no idea why Harry Markopolos would not buy. Actually, I think the name of the way, because I couldn't find it. GE fraud, which is just a dagger of a domain name. Buy domain names associated with your brand, people. Like, that is a absolute dagger. But why actually does GE also not buy an ad for this? Because if I do GE fraud, of course they bought an ad. Yeah, of course. But, and for a space in between, but why would you not do .com? Okay, so they do with a space, probably because of broad match modifier, but probably not with fraud.com. Wow, okay. Oh, I did get fraud, but gefraud.com is the name of the website if you want to read the report, which it's 175 pages. It's probably really dry in some places, but yeah, it's I think it'll be interesting if you're interested in this sort of thing. And yeah, I have no idea why they didn't buy that ad. But anyways, yeah, this is a story on just understanding the narrative and controlling the narrative as the best of your ability. And if anything happens definitively, I'll come out and tell you guys, or when I get through the report, I'll tell you guys. But I'm assuming by then a lot will be uncovered. But it's just fascinating when you have someone with proof and, you have another party with obviously an interest, a financial interest, to say that person's not telling the truth. And if they are lying, this is one of the most egregious lies in the history of fraud. So ironically, coming from the Madoff whistleblower. So if anything happens, I'll let you guys know. Thanks for checking this out. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share the video if you thought it was interesting. More videos coming out. We're going to be doing 10 and 6 p.m. every day, and we'll see what happens and how you guys respond. So thanks a lot for checking this out, and I'll see you soon.